Hi, my name is Molly Tipping, and I am a Feldenkrais practitioner working in Perth, Western Australia, the land of the Whadjuk Noongar Nation. Today I'm going to talk about why anxiety is not an emotion. This clarity came to me many years ago when I was working with a colleague who is a psychologist, and we had butcher's paper all over the floor, and we were putting into kind of the different sections of the space what we wanted to talk about and what would be her area of kind of teaching and what would be mine and where we would intersect. And one of the things that kind of came up in that space was, actually we both have arenas in this emotional space. We both work in this emotional space in different ways. And so we were looking at, well, what are the areas that, she's really passionate about? What am I really passionate about? And we were working specifically across the arena of anxiety and stress reduction and increasing well-being. And we suddenly realized, and I had this kind of moment where I just stopped and was like, do you know what? Anxiety is not an emotion. And it was such a beautiful clarification for me that actually anxiety is simply a perturbation within the nervous system, a kind of threat response available to the nervous system to kind of orchestrate when things are overwhelming, when they're too unfamiliar and we can't track them, when things are moving too quickly, when we are underwhelmed. There's all of these experiences where we have a stress or a threat or an anxiety response. But it suddenly occurred to me that anxiety itself is not an emotion, but it does contain within it a number of emotions. And for each of us and for different situations, what we're going to notice is that we're having an anxiety response, we're having a stress response. But actually, there are different emotions within that experience. So sometimes I'm going to have sadness that is going to be a kind of part of my anxiety response. And sometimes it's going to be shame, it's going to be fear, it's going to be anger. Maybe it's a kind of combination of them all. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull out my little whiteboard, which is over here, and we're just going to write a few things down on the whiteboard just to see if we can kind of do a bit of a brain dump of what emotions might exist in the experience of anxiety. Okay, so got my whiteboard marker. So we've got this experience of anxiety. Okay, and there's all of these things. There's going to be a whole raft of physiological changes we're going to notice. There's going to be our behaviors and actions and movements that are going to be kind of linked with that. There's going to be a whole series of thoughts and thinking processes. But there's going to be, within this experience of anxiety, a very specific emotional kind of signature, or emotional cocktail, maybe is a better kind of way of thinking of it. And there's going to potentially be one or many that are going to be particular to us quite regularly or just in relation to this moment. So a really common one with anxiety is guilt. And so many people, when they realize, oh my goodness, my anxiety is actually just me feeling so much guilt. Also shame. It can be a really wonderful realization, because then if I recognize that my anxiety is a guilt experience, then I can do something about that guilt. Sometimes when we're just attending to anxiety, we don't have enough specific information that's going to lead us in a direction that's going to be most useful. Of course, anxiety can include anger. It can include sadness. You see that clearly? Yep. Let's see if I've got a better pen. It's going to include sometimes grief. Oh, that's a better pen. Look at that. Beautiful. Let me go over these ones. Loneliness, that can be a really big one for anxiety. Helplessness. Hopelessness. You tell me what you think I should write on this board. Jealousy. What else have we got? Regret. Yeah, that's a good one. What else? Fear, of course, fear. Just genuinely being scared, yeah? And sometimes we think of anxiety as being fear, but actually, for many people, anxiety is not fear. For many people, anxiety is actually grief and it's loneliness. What else have we got? It can be worry. It can be a kind of existential, I'm not going to know how to spell this, existential. You'll have to excuse my spelling. It's existential kind of doom, maybe. What we'll often find when we are in anxiety experiences is that we're getting a number of things occurring, okay? So maybe it starts as grief. Someone dies who's close to us, and the kind of shock, the sadness of that is really a very strong and overwhelming experience. But maybe even in that experience, there's anger. Maybe we feel anger toward this person who has died. But then, of course, we're going to feel ashamed that we feel angry because it's like, they've died and now I'm feeling angry. We might be feeling a sense then of loneliness, of like you've left and now I'm feeling really lonely. Maybe that's going to bring up a sense of hopelessness and existential doom, kind of worry for our own existence. There's going to be a whole heap of things that are going to kind of come with this experience. And what's often really interesting is that this kind of experience of the emotions is so overwhelming, it elicits the anxiety response. There is so many emotional complexities going on here that we then become almost hypersensitive to the experience. It threatens us in ways that we can't process the emotion properly. Or let's say we're in a state of grief and we're really busy. We don't have time to process grief. Maybe we don't have a really good network of people around us to really hold us and support us. And so the grief is not going to find a way to continue to evolve and change and to sort of be in the world with us. And so grief can turn into anxiety because we don't have the time and we don't have the support. We might feel embarrassed that we are feeling grief-stricken. Maybe we didn't even know this person and we're feeling grief-stricken. We're feeling lonely as a result of something that has occurred. But it could also be, say, in regards to anger. There's this really interesting thing with anger where the expression of anger can be so overwhelming and so powerful that we inhibit the expression of it. Maybe we've grown up and we've been told anger's not a good emotion to express. If we look at all of these, things I've written on the board, we tend to think of these as the negative emotions. But of course, that differentiating one emotion from another emotion is not very helpful necessarily, because if someone has died, being happy and joyful may be completely out of context and also not the most nourishing of emotions for me to be present to this moment in my life, which is very unique. So in these kinds of areas, if we are having anger and we don't feel like we're allowed to be angry, but we do feel this very deep rage that's building in us, we're going to be in conflict, and that's going to elicit an anxiety response. It could be that we feel a great deal of shame, but we feel like we can't say it, we can't express it. And so that, again, that kind of containment of a truth within us, a kind of tenderness, a vulnerability that in us makes us feel like we need to protect ourselves, makes us need we can keep ourselves contained in some kind of way so we don't let out this thing that we're not even maybe 100% sure we really understand yet. And so that's also going to raise or elicit an anxiety or a threat response. So what I want you just to do is to take a little moment. Maybe I haven't written down the emotion that is most pertinent for you when you're feeling stressed and anxious. But I want you just to kind of take a little moment to consider which of these emotions, which are the ones that you notice in this moment, you go, actually, you know what? That's a part of my anxiety experience. I feel guilty. And then I feel angry that I feel guilty. And then I feel sad and I feel helpless. Because when we get really clear on what it is that is the underneath tendernesses, the underneath emotional needs, then we can meet that need. Grief and sadness can be met with time to reflect, time to be held and supported. Anger can be met with learning to turn our conflicts into conversations and being supported to step forward and say, hey, this is not working. I need this to change in some way. All of these experiences are beautiful learning experiences if we find the avenues that really support their actions in the world. If we come together as individuals and collective members of this beautiful world and we support each other in finding the fruitfulness and finding the learning and the connections to humanity that exist in each of these experiences. I hope that was useful. If you have any questions, of course, pop them down in the comments box and I'll get back to you. Thank you. Have a great day.